We've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and we are going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. The cartels are running Mexico. It's very, very sad to watch and see what's happened to that country, but the cartels are running, and they're killing 250, 300,000 people in our country every single year. The drugs, it's horrible. It's devastated families. You know, you lose a child or a parent. I mean, parents are dying too with drugs. So we've done a really good job. We're knocking it down. The numbers are really getting to be, they're always going to be too high if you have one person, but they're going down just like the border. The border was a total mess for years. I did it the first time very quickly, and this time I did it even better because this was a bigger mess. This was a border like no other probably in the history of the world. There's never been a border like that when anybody could just walk into your country.
The border's ostensibly really closed now.
Closed. You can't come in. And nobody comes. Nobody even tries.
Forget everything you thought you knew about border security because the old playbook just got tossed into the shredder. After that absolute shock to the system, the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the White House isn't taking a victory lap. Instead, President Trump is pivoting. He's taking the full, unfiltered power of the American military and pointing it straight at the southern border. We're not just talking about more cameras or higher fences. We're talking about the start of direct, kinetic action against the cartels right on Mexican soil. The line in the sand has been moved, and this time it's being drawn with heavy hardware. To really get why things are escalating this fast, you have to look at what just went down in Venezuela. A few days ago, U.S. forces pulled off an operation that left the rest of the world staring with their mouths open. They actually went in and grabbed the dictator, Nicolas Maduro. It wasn't just a win, it was a massive signal that the U.S. is done playing by the old rules of engagement in this hemisphere. That wasn't some one-off mission. It was a loud, clear declaration. The administration just proved that a border isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card anymore. If you're labeled a top-tier threat to American security, there's nowhere to hide. Taking out the Maduro regime's leadership was the blueprint. Now, Washington is ready to act on its own, without waiting for permission, to tear apart the criminal networks that have been operating like they're untouchable for decades. It all became official on January 8th. Sitting down with Sean Hannity inside the White House, President Trump didn't mince words. He confirmed what many had been whispering about. Those naval blockades we've seen against drug runners, that was just the warm-up. We've officially moved into phase 2, and that means land operations. The president didn't look like he was interested in a debate. He looked like a man who'd already made up his mind. He's moving the strategy from just watching the water to actively hitting the infrastructure, the warehouses, the labs, the compounds of the cartels inside Mexico itself. We are watching the total collapse of the old diplomatic wait-and-see approach. It's being replaced by what can only be described as a full-scale military intervention to wipe out a danger that's been sitting on our doorstep for way too long. So how do they justify this kind of heat? Simple. Look at the body count. During that talk on Fox News, Trump didn't hold back on the numbers, and they are grim. He's claiming these criminal syndicates are responsible for killing between 250,000 and 300,000 Americans every single year. Now, some of the bureaucrats over at the CDC might quibble with those specific figures, but for this administration, the exact math doesn't change the reality of the carnage. They see an entire generation being hollowed out by what's coming across that border. When the president talks about the families being destroyed, he's not framing this as a political talking point. He's framing it as a moral necessity. He's treating the drug trade like a literal invasion, and he's using that to justify a response that matches the scale of the tragedy. The core of the president's argument comes down to one uncomfortable question. Who's actually in charge down there? In his interview, Trump touched on a nerve that plenty of security experts have been feeling for years. that the Mexican government has basically handed over the keys. He said it flat out. The cartels are running Mexico. By officially branding these groups as terrorist organizations and pointing out that local cops can't or won't stop them, the White House is laying the legal tracks for this train to keep moving. The logic is brutal but simple. If the country next door can't keep its own house in order, and that mess is spilling over into ours, the United States is going to step in and do the cleaning itself. As you'd expect, the pushback from Mexico City was instant, and it was loud. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum didn't pull any punches, rejecting the idea of American boots or missiles on her soil before the ink on the headlines was even dry. She's leaning hard into the idea of national sovereignty, warning that any unilateral strikes would be a massive betrayal of trust and international law. It's a high-stakes game of chicken. The Mexican government is trying to look tough and protect its pride while dealing with the reality of cartel violence they can't seem to contain. But here's the thing. Washington doesn't seem to care about the diplomatic niceties anymore. When they see a crisis they've labeled existential, they aren't looking for a seat at the table. They're looking to end the threat. You want to see how serious this is? Just look at the markets. The second people realized this wasn't just tough talk, the Mexican peso took a nosedive, losing 8.4% of its value almost instantly. Investors are terrified of what this kind of instability does to business. We're talking about the USMCA, a trade deal worth over $800 billion a year, and it's suddenly sitting on a powder keg. The markets are starting to realize that a military operation across the border isn't just about security. It's going to cause some serious economic pain. Supply chains that both countries rely on could be snapped overnight. But the vibe coming out of the White House is clear. They're willing to take the hit. They're betting that fixing the security crisis is worth whatever economic fallout follows. As the military gets ready for these land strikes, the reality is finally sinking in across Latin America. Between Maduro being in custody and the targets being painted on the cartels, it's clear that Trump meant exactly what he said. The whole hemisphere is in play. Over on Capitol Hill, you've got members of Congress scrambling, trying to pass resolutions to rein in the president's war powers because they're terrified of getting sucked into a forever war next door. But the executive branch is already moving at a speed that makes Congress look like it's standing still. We're seeing a version of American power that's been dormant for a long time. The days of polite requests and diplomatic check-ins are over. The waiting is finished. The operation has already started.